Hi, here I am, backlit once again, still house sitting at a friend's house. So maybe you'll hear the chickens. They're kind of nearby because they're used to me giving them treats. Okay, so it is the 8th of April, the first diary entry for April, and it's a Saturday. And it is such a long diary entry, definitely the longest so far. 3 big paragraphs, which would be long even if they were single diary entries. So I'm simply going to do one at a time. I tend to go long anyway. So we've got Saturday, April 8th, that will be lasting for 3 sessions. So 3 days in our time. And finally we get to Pascha. And I'm still a little confused because Dmitri refers to holidays or holy days, and I think he's talking about Holy Week, where there's a special service every day, 1 or 2 special services every day. So bear with me on that. I'm just making a quick change here because I had accidentally put Vespers instead of Orthros. Okay. And yes. All right. So let's start. 8th April 1906, a Saturday. Well, it seems like it's been about 2 weeks since I last wrote in my diary. Not good. The Pascha holy days were rather boring. There was only one day that was kind of fun, April 6th, and that was only because there was a magician. But I need to start at the beginning and describe each day. There was Orthros on Saturday evening. I wore the uniform of the 2nd Battalion because that was what Uncle Nicky wanted. I wanted to wear my horse guard's tunic, but Uncle Nicky ordered me to put on the tunic of the 2nd. Naturally, I didn't say anything to him about my wish. I just asked. Oh well, it was fine. We went to Orthros, which ended up lasting at least 2 hours. I have to admit, I suddenly started feeling unwell, but then it passed. Maria had a frightful headache that started before the service, so she sat with Olga the whole time, and I was very much surprised that Olga sat, i.e. even sat during the gospel reading, which in my opinion was going a little too far. As I said before, the service stretched on for a very long time, and in the end I was very bored. Sinful fellow. Okay, charming diary entry. Or first part of the diary entry. So he feels like it's been 2 weeks since he last wrote his diary, but it was actually the 28th of March that we had the last diary entry. So it hasn't been 2 weeks. Getting on toward 2 weeks, but not quite 2 weeks. So clearly he was busy during Holy Week and wasn't able to find the time to write, and probably tired after coming home from the various services. And for a 14-year-old, I think any 14-year-old, there are highlights, of course, but if you're going to every service during Holy Week, then of course you're going to find it boring. I mean, monstrously boring. Adults find it boring, I have to admit. Not all of it. Some parts of the services are very, very touching and very worth going to. Chanters tend to like to take every word and take a 1-syllable word and stretch it into 4 or 5 syllables. I shouldn't use the word show off, but that's the only word that's popping into my head at the moment. It's a special occasion for them, and they want to do beautiful chant, and that tends to make things longer. But I am digressing. So the only day that was kind of fun was April 6th. So what happened on April 6th? Well, it was Maria's birthday, so I guess she got her little fox terrier puppy, and there was a little party for her, which ordinarily would be verboten on during Holy Week, but what are you going to do? It's her birthday, so I think they made the right decision about that, and they had a magician come to entertain the children. I wonder how that magician felt about it, suddenly being in a Grand Ducal or household, or even at the Alexander Palace. And it's kind of, as an interesting aside, Grand Duke Sergei and Aunt Ella, Uncle Sergei and Aunt Ella, one or both of them had been quite intrigued by the American magician Harry Houdini. And so when Harry Houdini came to Russia to do some performances, they actually asked him to come and see them in Moscow. And he did a little sort of mini performance for them. And I don't know if Dmitri and Maria were present at that. I can't remember the date. I'm sure they would have been present if they were there at the time. But anyway, Dmitri enjoyed the magician, and he's decided, I guess this is why this diary entry is so long, he's decided that he should really describe the whole of Holy Week when he wasn't writing his diary. So he says there was Orthros on Saturday evening. So I'm a little bit confused by this, because Orthros is actually matins. It's the morning service. So the only time you have Orthros in the evening is when you're going to have a liturgy that follows, because you always have to have an Orthros service before the liturgy. And if you're going to have, and usually liturgy is in the morning, but if you're going to have an evening or nighttime liturgy, then you have Orthros in the evening. So but it can't actually be Pascha, because then he goes on and talks about the other services in the week after, unless those were Bright Week services. I'm not sure. I never go to Bright Week services. But anyway, all we can say is that he went to an Orthros service on Saturday evening, and Orthros, like Vespers, the evening service, is usually quite short. I mean, you can go to a Vesper service that's 40 minutes, and that's much more typical than, something that goes on for an hour, let alone 2 hours or more. Maybe it was just so long that it wasn't actually more than 2 hours. Maybe that was just his perception, but God knows it could have been. So he had really wanted to wear his horse guard's tunic, but Uncle Nicky, that wasn't what Uncle Nicky wanted. And so he even uses the strange word ordered. Uncle Nicky ordered me to put on the tunic, and that makes it sound as though there were almost some kind of conflict between the two of them, but there clearly was not. He just is using that word for whatever reason. But he didn't even tell Uncle Nicky that he really wanted to wear his horse guard's tunic. He says he just asked. He just said, "Oh, can I wear my horse guard's tunic?" Sorry, I shouldn't be putting words in his mouth. Anyway, I didn't say anything about him to him about my wish. I just asked. So that, and as he says, it was fine. So Orthros ended up lasting a very long time, and Dmitri was a little scandalized. So his sister had a headache. Apparently they both had headaches off and on, and she had a headache that started before the service, and so during the service she understandably was going to sit. And I think I mentioned before that you do not sit during Orthodox service. In traditional Orthodox churches, there are not even pews. There are just a few chairs along the side walls so that people who are genuinely infirm or weak or terribly elderly can sit, especially during a long service. But both men and women and both boys and girls stood throughout the service. Unless you're kneeling, then you're standing. So Dmitri understands clearly that his sister is ill and that it's all right for her to sit. I think you remember when he was ill, genuinely ill, he was terribly mortified at the idea that he might have to sit during the service. So for him, that was quite an issue. It would be embarrassing. Maybe girls didn't find it as much so, but he's really kind of scandalized with what Olga does. So the first question is, who was Olga? Was she the Tsar's daughter, who was 10 at the time, or was she Olga, the Tsar's sister, who was an adult? That he doesn't say. So which of them would he be more likely to just refer to as Olga? I think both of them. So it's really impossible to say. But she sat during the gospel reading. So it's one thing to sit for a little while, in Dmitri's opinion, but nobody sits during the gospel reading if they can get onto their feet at all. The gospel reading is, Orthodox always stand for the gospel reading or for prayers, even if it's a fairly informal church where there are pews and where you can sit through most of the service. The gospel reading is something that you always stand for. So he's not pointing the finger at Maria, but he is saying that in his opinion that was going too far on the part of Olga, whoever she was. And it's almost kind of cute the way he's what's the word, he can be, as he puts it, naughty. He can be quite mischievous, and he likes his jokes and his pranks, but he really wants people to behave themselves. He gets kind of anxious, he gets kind of unhappy when the people around him, especially other children, but sometimes even the emperor. You remember when he was in his diary scolding the emperor for going off and hunting at an inappropriate time. So he reminds me some of the kids I had in Sunday school. I was actually an Greek Orthodox Sunday school teacher or catechist for about 10 years. And there was one boy in my 4th grade Sunday school class, and I was told by his aunt, his name was Dmitri too, oddly enough, but I was told by his aunt that when he was visiting her house during Lent, on one occasion she saw him going through the garbage at her house looking for proof that his cousins had been eating things, had not been keeping the fast. And so that was definitely going a little far, and I don't think Dmitri the Grand Duke was quite that extreme. Although Dmitri, the Sunday school boy, ended up being a brilliant, what did he go into? It was organic chemistry or something like that. But anyway, I find it a little bit funny that, in the sense of humorous, not strange, that he was such a proper little person, and aside from his own mischief, he wanted the people around him, both adults and children, to behave the way they were supposed to behave. And then he admits that he was bored. Good Lord, I would have been as well. But he says he calls himself sinful fellow. So again, that's rather sweet on his part. And I'll leave it at that. And do come back next time for more description of how Grand Duke Dmitri, age 14, spent Holy Week in 1906. Bye.